Hi, this is Rob Garf with Salesforce Commerce Cloud, and I'm here with Jill Standish from Accenture. Why don't you say hello? Give us a little background in retail. I know you've been here forever, and give a little background.
Oh, thanks, here forever. Hi, I'm Jill Standish, and I lead the retail practice at Accenture, so I'm glad to be here. I've been in this industry, it seems like forever. I've been here, I started my career early in the store business, and moved around a bit, but I've always loved retail. It's been my career.
That's great, and we're happy to have you here today, and especially because we're here to talk about some recent research that Salesforce and Accenture collaborated on regarding organizational transformation. So you want to talk a little bit about what prompted us to do this research?
Well, if you think of industries, you know, retail is, I hate to say it, but we're kind of laggards. I mean, if you just look at the fact that this is the 10-year anniversary of the iPhone, and if you go into a store, the store really hasn't changed very much. So what is it that is causing this lagging of innovation in retail if you compare it to other industries? I think that was what prompted us. We said, is there something going on here within the four walls of these firms that is kind of inhibiting this from happening? So that was the reason.
Yeah, you know, what's interesting, as we dove into this information and the research that we did, we also realized these laggards are actually getting separated by a lot of these leaders. And these leaders are coming from these upstarts that didn't even exist 10 years ago. If you look at some of the pure play or digital natives who started online and now have opened stores and have not had all that baggage, right, to have to deal with, which you've seen for many years. Or if you're thinking about some of the subscription models who are taking this rich data intelligence and digital first approach, really disrupting and creating a lot of this gap that's existing.
Exactly, so when we were collaborating together, a couple of things we thought through is, are there certain characteristics within an organization that we could actually test with our survey and see if those were some of the things that came out as really important.
Yeah.
So why don't we kind of go through this?
Why don't we talk about it? We identified 6 characteristics, and I love how you say these are like the 6 characteristics of survival. You need to really...
I was kind of dramatic there, wasn't I?
But
yes.
I think there's something to this, and it's interesting when you look at some of these leaders, they really are harnessing these characteristics to differentiate themselves. And if you think about even before the characteristics, you're seeing that the organization today is looking a lot different than the organization from yesteryear. When you're product-centric, you're thinking about throughput, you're thinking about velocity, quality, forecasting. In this world, when everything is so interconnected and dependent on partners, it's things like vision. Why don't you talk a little bit about how important, why vision is important?
Well, if you think of actually your website and your stores, getting everybody aligned on what that vision is, are they ambassadors of your brand? I mean, there's examples in the marketplace today of companies that when you walk into a store, you know what the story is. You know the story behind the brand. So there's great companies that are becoming very viral and tribal about their products. But then there's those that actually, if you went up to a sales associate in a store and said, what is the vision of this firm? They probably would have a hard time. So vision was kind of, if you think about it, there's great retail examples of, is the CEO's message reaching all the way down to the sales associate?
Yeah, that's
And that's what we were getting to in terms of vision.
Yeah, and they're also solving a customer problem versus just pushing product into the store. And that means a collaboration and a consolidation of various things from products to services to community and really being part of a lifestyle. So let's move on from vision. Let's talk a little bit about culture. You know, in the research we saw, culture was a big, actually in the research it showed that's the biggest hurdle that retailers are trying to overcome. A lot of it has to do with collaboration, a lot of it has to do with making faster decisions. What do you see in your day-to-day work with retailers on that front?
So culture's a big one. First of all, it's probably the one that a lot of people talk about. It was actually way up there in terms of what the survey said were kind of hard things to handle. So culture, first of all, I think that culture in retail, we're a bunch of perfectionists. So if you think about it, we want the website to be beautiful, we want the stores to be beautiful, we want our projects to return the ROI. I mean, this is a perfectionist culture. Whereas in the startup mode or the ones that are actually doing the fast innovation, it's okay to say beta. Can you imagine logging on to a retailer's website and it says beta?
Right, yeah, exactly.
We're under construction, right? Or even in a store, can you imagine having a department with a yellow circle around it saying, this is a test? You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's a part of the culture which is everything has to be perfect, which I think stops fast experimentation or innovation. So that's kind of one. The other thing about culture is, everyone is kind of also very insular. So this notion of collaboration is a really good one. I mean, a lot of the project work that we do, if you think about project work in the past as a consultant, you always had to sign NDAs, you couldn't talk to their competitor, you do it once and wouldn't be able to do it again. I mean, that was the culture of innovation because the retailer thought, you know, I'm going to use this as my differentiation.
Yeah, and that's interesting in terms of the insular. I think that's really important in that it was always, we got to do it ourselves. We got to build everything ourselves, hug the server from the technology side. We need to hire all of our resources.
Or acquire a firm.
Acquire a firm.
Yep.
But now it's kind of this loosely entangled ecosystem, if you will, of products and services and people that you bring together. And as Mark West, who's the CEO of LLX GBS, who operates brands like Jimmy Choo and Bally's and Belstaff, he talks about this new organization that really just acts as a steward on behalf of the customers. The one thing they do own is the customer, but they don't need to own and operate all of these pieces that bring the customer experience to them. So let's motor through a couple more of the characteristics and then we'll highlight a couple of stats here. So market insights. That came up really heavy in terms of importance. That actually was one of the top two along with innovation, which we'll get into next, as the most important characteristics that the organizations we talked to cited. What do you see from market insights?
Well, I think what's disrupting this industry a lot is, you know, all of these valleys going on. So you got Silicon Valley, you've got the Valley here in New York, or Silicon Alley in New York, you've got Silicon Docks. So you have a ton of focus around startups. But that is not enough. I mean, there's thousands of little companies, there's 1,000 of great ideas. And so I think as an innovation officer or a C-level exec in retail today, it's so hard to know everything. And I think they want to be smart and they want to be representative of what's happening in the marketplace, but because things are happening so darn fast, how could you know everything?
Yeah.
And that's the hard part. So you're right, market insight was way up there with innovation as the two things that people said is hard and really hard for our organization to handle.
And really important. And the market insights piece, what the research came out to show is the store associates. That's your front line to understand what's happening and put your finger on the pulse. You can't just do it from the mothership back at the headquarters. Really, they're the front line. They know what's going on. They're not only the ambassador, but they are your line into the market insights.
But look at the lack of innovation in that space of getting market insight from store associates. Just look at it. I mean, if there was a way to curate all that first-hand knowledge, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
where the magic happens. 90% of the transactions still happen in there, and we're not leveraging those resources well enough. So, market insights. We also looked at
innovation.
Let's talk about innovation.
Because that was those two were the top, right? You know, innovation. Back to the point of perfectionist culture. Back to the point of not knowing all the market insight. And actually, there's another piece of this which I think is really important, is financial. I mean, if you look at how retailers are evaluated by the street, it's all about top line and profit, right? So how can you actually take cost out of your business to go invest in these experiments when there's a culture of, you know, making sure you do ROI, proving it out first, et cetera. So I think that was part of the reason why innovation is tough.
Yeah, so let's talk about this whole performance piece of it. Based on the 200 retailers we talked to and branded manufacturers, we found actually a subset that were higher performers than their counterparts, lower performers. Leaders or laggards, we called them. And these laggards, they cited their highest difference between the leaders and laggards was around data intelligence, was one of the other characteristics. And what we saw from the data of intelligence, it's not just about collecting all the data, managing all the data, but it's making sense of it and actually turning that over to your consumers, to your store associates.
I mean, if there's an old adage in retail, you've heard this 100 times like I have, which is, we have all this data, but we have no insight.
Right.
And that is so darn true. I mean, every client we work with is really struggling with the same thing. And I think there's some tools coming out in the marketplace which will help, dashboard-based tools, predictive tools, suggesting what is the right action to take. And if we look forward, I'm hoping that things like AI and machine learning will help in this space, because data has got to inform all of that. But today, we still have the problem.
Yeah, that's right.
We still have the problem, which is so much data and not enough insight, actionable insight.
Yeah, you look at these upstarts, they're hiring data scientists after data scientists. It's about automating a lot of these processes, a lot of these decisions, and unveiling that to these store associates.
I mean, who would have thought that the hottest commodity right now with retailers is like machine learners, PhDs in math?
That's right.
I mean, the whole world has changed.
Yeah, and there's a definite talent gap as it relates to
Total talent gap.
So the last one we'll talk about in terms of characteristics is agility. Seeing retailers move really quickly, moving into new spaces as well. Again, looking at themselves beyond just product companies, but service companies, and be able to move and do that. And again, in an interconnected way, realizing that you don't necessarily have to directly bring that service to the consumer, but you can package it up in a way and curate it in a way that is in a personalized manner to them.
I think there's a couple of aspects of agility. If you look at how fast some of these online pure plays go, there's things like how fast can you get a new product up on your website?
Yep.
How fast can you change a price? How quickly can you change your assortment? A lot of that is complex in a store environment, we all get it. But I think if you just think about the processes that it would take to go get a price change, who has to approve it? How long does that take? Whereas these pure plays can do it on the fly. There's a lot of agility in that.
Just a couple stats to run by so you can get some insight from you. So
okay.
What the research showed is 70% of those that responded say there's going to be huge, massive change that's going to take place, right? So they recognize the change, they realize it's not so easy to do. What we looked at also was the difference of branded manufacturers versus traditional retailers, right? And what we found is branded manufacturers saw change at a 2 times lower rate. So the question I have for you is, are they like head in the sand, are totally underestimating it, or do they not have all the baggage, the branded manufacturers who have only been going direct to consumers for the last 10 or 15 years, do they not have all the baggage of the technology, of the processes, of all this legacy stuff that they can leapfrog the traditional retailers?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things going. If you look at branded manufacturers or even brands in general, there is absolutely this thing going on where brands are looking at ways to reach the consumer. So this wholesale retail channel is now coming in together in terms of how they manage their business for really good reason. I mean, if you just look at fashion, for example, some of these brands are saying, look, department store as my channel is actually, they're getting foot traffic by doing promotions. Can I actually keep my actual profit higher by going direct? So this notion of there's this actual, I don't know what you call it, rift between the two,
right, sure.
I think is part of what's causing people to kind of go, what do I do next?
Sure.
Right, and think about what do I do next? There's also your point on, is there some baggage with old technology? Right. Absolutely there is. Absolutely there is.
And I think that's holding back the agility. So the price change, right, it's such a basic thing you have to potentially do in 5, 6, 7, 10 different systems, right? So what we're seeing this drive towards this reinvention of consumer-facing technology to really consolidate what has historically been disparate systems. And retailers, no fault of their own, they invested in disparate systems to solve specific problems.
And then they tailored the heck out of it.
Right, exactly. But now consolidating all of that to have a consistent and unified view of customer, product, inventory. I think that's going to really propel the agility.
And I know this helps your message around Salesforce, but it's all about the cloud as well. So having things on the cloud, I know, and having the innovation be delivered as a service is I think going to change a lot of this.
Cool, so I'll leave with one stat and then I'll open up to you to bring us home, all right?
Okay, all right,
yeah,
fine.
So of everything, as I mentioned, we heard that culture is the most difficult. In fact, it's 25% higher difficulty than any of the other 5 characteristics. So certainly there's this essence of we need to change, but it's difficult to do it. So I'll go back to why did you call it the 6 characteristics for
of survival?
Yeah.
Well, if you just take some stats around what happened in holiday, I know this is a US stat, but I'll give some stats, which is there was about a 3.8% increase in retail year on year, which is great for holiday. The increase in terms of store foot traffic went down. So if you look at just people participating in retail, it went down 1.5% for people going to a store in terms of foot traffic. Participation in online and just number of shoppers online went up 15%. So if you just think about what's happening, right? People are actually looking at different channels. We all knew this was coming.
Yeah.
But if you just look at Christmas, I think it's going to wake up a lot of these companies to say, maybe we had some great sales and we had some great top line revenue, but now, oh my God, look what's happening with profit. Very promotional, and actually foot traffic was down, which everyone's kind of concerned about. Yeah,
well, it's funny you say 3% is good for traditional brick and mortar, whereas across our shopping index, which we look at around the holiday, actually digital was up 34%. So it shows the considerable shift that's happening.
So listen, 1734, it's double digit and it's big.
It's big, exactly. It's big. And retailers need to think about, the way I think about it is retailers need to really tear deep into the fabric of their organization and re-sew it in a different way. They can't get there from here. And I think that is what the research really showed us, is we need to look at it fundamentally different.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things in the talent model which we should all watch. Is you're seeing a lot of people from different industries wind up in retail. So you're seeing some of the pure play executives now go back in traditional retail. We're seeing some folks coming from product manufacturing go into retail. So I think there's a talent shift going on, which I think is very healthy for this industry.
Nice, so stay tuned for, I think we titled the report something like Retail Transformation or Retail Organizations, the next wave of retail transformation. So look out for those 6 characteristics to make sure you survive.
And it's, 6 characteristics of survival, so it's pretty dramatic.
I love it. Thanks, Jill. It's always
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
Thanks, Rob.